All right, we're live. Now, here's the thing I don't know. Can we zoom in?
No, you can zoom it up.
Yeah, I think you could.
You can? On live?
Do you want me to bring my phone stand in next class?
So far that works. We'll see what happens. I have one. I just didn't bring it because I didn't know we were going live tonight.
What's up, Gabby?
Everybody say hi to Gabby.
Hi, Gabby.
Where's your phone?
She joined.
How did she join?
Gabby, go dance. Go dance.
No,
She didn't join us?
I don't think so. You know.
Okay, in any which case. All right, so we are talking today about logarithms. I kept saying that at some point we were going to talk about logarithms, which is a fancy way to say the word exponent. That's it. Logs gets a bad rap because it's new, it's something you've not heard of. It's sort of like driving a car backwards, okay, but it's the rules for exponents. Okay, so logs are exponents. Now, at the top, we've got a function y equals 2 to the x, and it's graphed. Okay? That's what we spent an entire unit on, graphing the y equals 2 to the x. Here's my table. First question, is this function y equals 2 to the x 1 to 1? It's either going to be a yes or no, and how do we know?
Yes.
Louder.
Pass the best on this.
Which test? Vertical line test makes it a function. How do I know if it's going to be a 1-to-1 function?
Pass the horizontal as a parent.
Because it passes both the vertical and horizontal.
Gabby,
So yes,
come on.
it is,
Wait, how do you know if it's horizontal again?
because it passes the vertical and horizontal line test. Alana, can you just shut the door so?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so the vertical line test means I draw a vertical line anywhere on the picture and it only touches the graph once. Horizontal line test means I draw it anywhere on the picture and it only touches the graph a maximum of once. Okay. Now, part B says, based on my answer to part A, being that it is 1-to-1, what do I know about the inverse of the function? Anybody know what that means? Based on that this is a 1-to-1 function, what does that tell me about the inverse of the function? Okay, that's kind of what I thought the answer was going to be, so no problem. We're going to do part C first and come back to part B. All right, part C says, create a table for the inverse. What does inverse mean again?
Switch the x and y.
Switch the x and the y. So that means instead of -3 1/8, I want 1/8 -3. I'm going to want 1/4 -2, 1/2 -1,
Oh wait, isn't it like the reflection?
1 0, yes, 2 1, 4 2, and 8 3. Is there anybody who does not know where I got those numbers from? Okay, so go ahead and plot those points. Plot those points.
And this is the offset from I like the work.
Ethan, do you have your calculator?
No.
16 isn't there.
Do I?
What's that?
Oh, big.
Well, there's something in number 12, and we don't have a number 12, so that means whoever took 15 probably has 16.
Who's 15?
So 1/8 -3, -2, 1.
Mine's the horizontal. Mine's always blue too.
Okay, and so my new graph, my inverse, looks like this. Okay. Now, the box at the bottom says, notice that as always, right, the graphs of f of x and f inverse, that notation f to the negative 1. Ethan, if you could close that, we're going to do that next period.
Oh.
Okay? So f of x and f inverse of x. Nobody's going to ask me on test day what the notation is. F to the negative 1 means f inverse. They are symmetrical about the line y equals x. So here's the line y equals x, and it's just a line reflection. Any question? No.
Oh, that.
I know I ended it. Okay,
No one's
so
typing those. She's typing a lot.
back to part B.
Wait, she said, what is that blue, like the inverse? Someone answered in yellow, look.
Yes.
Yes,
Why?
Okay.
So that Gabby can see.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to part B. Now that we graphed the blue inverse,
Yeah, Gabby, the blue.
is this blue inverse a function? Is the blue inverse graph a function?
Yes.
No, it doesn't pass.
Is the,
Yes.
this blue one a function?
Yes, it is.
Yes, how do you know?
Because it passes the vertical and the horizontal line.
It passes the vertical line test.
And the vertical.
If it's going to pass both, then it's a one-to-one function. I asked if it was a function. Okay, so part B said, based that I knew part A was one-to-one, I already knew the answer to part B, because if something is a one-to-one function, it tells me that the inverse is also a function. That's what it means to be one-to-one. A regular function passes the vertical. The reason I give it the horizontal is so that I know if it's one-to-one, which will mean that the inverse will be a function without me having to actually graph it. But if I don't remember what it means, I just graph it, and then I already know it's a function. Okay, so it's one of those do you notice things. Okay, so we didn't notice it when we did part B, but once we did the graph for part C and I asked if it was a function, almost everybody just said yes, it's a function. So it wasn't a big deal. Okay, Tara, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions about A, B, or C?
So
Yeah.
the function, I mean, the inverse would also be a one-to-one, right?
The inverse coincidentally also happens to be a one-to-one, yes. Okay, now part D says, if I was going to find the inverse, right? If I was going to find the inverse algebraically, what would be my first step? So right now, the graph is y equals 2 to the x. So what would be the first step?
You would switch the x and the y.
The first step is I would switch the x and the y. So it would say x equals 2 to the y. What's the second step to finding the inverse?
Get y on its own.
Yes, solve it for y. Now, the problem is that it's being raised to the y power. How do you un-y it?
Square
no,
y.
you
Square y.
I want to y root it,
yeah.
right? I'm not going to square root it. It's not being raised to the squared power.
Yeah.
But it's being raised to the y, and I'm going to un-y it. All right, here's the problem when I un-y it. If I were to y root it, these would go away, and I would end up with the y root of x, which looks great, except I can't type it in my calculator because there's two variables. So there's got to be another way, because I can't type this, but it's correct.
I was gonna say, isn't it the same as like such points to the?
She can't see what you're writing.
X to the 1 over y, yes, but I still can't enter it because there are two variables. Okay, so since we can't,
She can't see what you're writing, she said.
Where is she? Oh my god, that's
Well.
so funny.
That's tough, Gabs. That's real tough.
Can't solve all these problems. Okay, so if I can't un-y it, okay, then I'm going to change the form from exponential form, right now it's an exponential form because the y is an exponent, to what we call logarithmic form. Remember I said logarithm is a fancy way to say the word exponent. Right now, this reads y is the exponent, the base is 2, and the answer is x. Does that make sense? Y is the exponent, so now y is going to be a fancy exponent called the logarithm. 2 is the base is the thing that has the exponent, but the answer is still x. Okay, that's what this paragraph says. The function, if I read this out loud, this says the function y equals log base b of x is the name we give the inverse of y equals b to the x. For example, y equals log base 2 of x. It's the inverse of y equals 2 to the x. So as I said before, y is the exponent. So y is the fancy exponent logarithm, right? Is means equals. Y is the fancy exponent. The base is 2, so the little number is 2, and the answer is x. That's the inverse of y equals 2 to the x. So, now we can write equivalent exponential functions. That's all this says. Y is the fancy exponent, the base is b, and the answer is x. The base is b, y is the exponent, and the answer is x. So these say the same thing. Logarithmic form, exponential form. Right? Logarithmic form has the word log in it. Exponential form just has an exponent in it.
So
But they say the same thing.
So log can actually represent any.
Now, they say the same thing. Y is the exponent. Y is the fancy word for exponent. B is the base. B is the base. X is the answer. This is the answer. So they say the same thing written 2 different ways. That's the part that's going to take the practice because that's the new stuff that you've never heard of before. Okay, so right now, yes, it's confusing. In about a half an hour, maybe less, it won't be. Definitely less, maybe about 15 minutes. Okay?
Do you log or do you
No. Okay, no. Okay, now, it says to change the format, so to go from log to exponential, exponential to log. Right? This is totally not mathematical, I made it up. I'm going to start at the base. You're going to go towards the equal sign and say zap. It's much more fun when you say zap. Start at the base. Go towards the equal sign. Zap. So we go down and around. If I'm going to do this side, I start at the base. The base is the thing that has the exponent. And this time I have to go to the right because the equal sign is on the right. It's always down and around. Zap. Which means when I rewrite this side, if I want to put it in log form, the first thing I'm going to do is say log base b. As I travel, the next thing I see is x, and it points to the answer, which is the exponent of y. So if I rewrite this, this would say log base b x equals y, which is what this says. Log base b, then x, but it's equal to y. Okay? And that's the part that's going to take the practice. Okay? Give me 10 minutes before you say you're confused. Okay, now, on the back.
Yes, no, I got it.
plug it into the calculator?
Should you?
It's a bad habit, but yes, you can because it's not always number. Okay, so Alani's question is, can I just plug this into the calculator? What's the matter?
He requested to be in the live.
Okay, so Alani's question is, can I plug this into the calculator? The answer is yes, but it is a bad habit because these are not always numbers. So if one of them is a letter, the calculator is useless. Okay, so let's practice off the calculator. I know when push comes to shove and it's number, you're going to type it in anyway. But it's a good non-calculator SAT question if you're taking that test.
Saturday.
Okay,
Yeah.
this Saturday? Next
week
Saturday? So, but a number simple question like this is not a Regents question. If there's a number and a letter, yes. Okay? Now, this says the log, if I read this out loud, log base 2 of 8. That's how you would read it. Log base 2 of 8. Log is a fancy way to say exponent. So the question says, what is the exponent whose base is 2 and whose answer is 8? Right? Log is the exponent. I want the exponent whose base is 2 and whose answer is 8. So the base is 2, I want the exponent, and the answer is 8 is what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking because that's how you read it. Therefore, log base 2 of 8 is equal to
2 to the third.
3, because 2 to the third is equal to 3.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's try it again. The exponent whose base is 4 and whose answer is 16. So I'm thinking 4 to some power is 16, right? They're asking me for the exponent because they're asking me for the logarithm. And so the exponent would be 2. Try letter C and D. You can certainly check your answers on the calculator. Has everybody found the log button?
There's a log button. There's a
Of
log
course,
button.
there's a log button.
Button is a log.
Okay, the log button, if you're looking for it, is to the left of number 1. It's in blue. So if I was trying the first question, the log base 2 of 8,
That's so good.
of course it would tell me it's 3. But if you only use the log button, you're not going to be able to answer any of the questions that have letters. So it's a bad habit, but it's a really good check. Okay?
How many zeros is this?
So try not to use the log button unless you get stuck. Five to what power is 625?
4.
So I know log base 5 of 625 is the same thing as saying 4. Log base 10 of 100,000 is 5. Okay, now the second row is a little trickier, so don't fall for the traps. I know you can use the calculator, but as soon as one of them is a letter, you can't use the calculator. That's more likely a Regents question, a rewrite with a letter, than a number. Okay? So, 6 to what power is 1 over 36? What number? -2. Remember, when you raise something to a negative exponent, you get a fraction. So as soon as you realize that the answer is a fraction, the log has to be a negative number. So 2 to what power? is 1 over 16? Negative 4. Alright, take a minute or two and try G and H. Try not to use the calculator unless you're checking. Okay, letter G. Log base 5 of the square root of 5 is? How many people did it without the calculator? How many do it without the calculator? How many people did it with the calculator? I knew it, which is fine. Okay, you should be able to do it both on and off, because as soon as one of them is a letter, the calculator is no good. This says 5 to some power equals 5 to the 1/2. Isn't the square root of 5 5 to the 1/2?
Yeah.
Okay, so when we're using logs, we try to use exponents, even if they're fractions, versus radicals. Well, because the square root of 5 is the same thing as saying 5 to the 1/2. And since log means exponent, I know that the exponent is going to be a fraction because there's a radical involved. So the exponent has to be some sort of fraction. Okay? Now I know x is 1/2. Okay, so let's try letter H without the calculator. Right now, this says 3 to some power equals 9 to the what power? Say it louder. 1/5 power. The 5th root of 9 is 9 to the 1/5 power. So far, so good? Now we have common bases. Right? I have an equation and I don't have common bases, but can I get common bases? Yes. So 9 will become 3 squared. This is 3 to the x. And once the bases are the same number, I don't need them anymore. So I get x equals 2/5. Because if you typed it in on your calculator, you probably got 0.4. Okay? So that is pretty tricky. That's going to take some time and some practice. Okay, but log is just a fancy way to say exponent. So they're asking me to solve for the exponent. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Let's try number 4 before we do number 3. Everybody turn their calculator over. No calculator. Okay, no calculator.
Oh my goodness.
Between which two consecutive integers must the log base 3 of 40 lie? Don't say the answer out loud. Try to rewrite it if you can. This is a really good non-calculator question on the SAT. Okay, and the correct answer is?
I'm still in the middle of it. debating 3 or 4.
Okay, let's do a rewrite. How do I rewrite log base 340?
3 to a certain power equals 40.
3 to a certain power is 40. So let's go through the numbers. 3 to the first,
It's just 3.
just 3.
Oh my God.
3 to the second,
It's 9.
3 to the third,
27.
27. So 3 to the third, 3 to the third is 27. What's 3 to the fourth power? 81. Where's 40? In between. So it's between 3 and 4.
I got it right.
Okay. Okay, try number 3. You can use your calculator if you need to. It's a graph, so I think you can do it. I don't need a calculator, but you can use a calculator for number 3. And the y-intercept is?
I have no idea.
Choice 1, it is 12. How many people looked on the graph? Y-intercept, I can look on the graph. Without the graph, what does it mean to be the y-intercept?
The x is 0. 0 is negative.
The x is 0, it touches the y-axis, so the x is 0. So if I just plug in 0 right there, then this question says log base 2, 8 plus 9. Well, log base 2, 8 means 2 to some power is 8, and the some power must be 3. And 3 plus 9 is still 12. Either on or off the calculator. Any questions? Okay, now for the bottom, it says the calculator, right? The calculator's already pre-programmed to what we call a common log. So the first question says use your calculator to do log of 1,000, right? So if I type in the log of 1,000, now notice I skipped the little box because there was no number there. If I hit enter, the number automatically fills in as a 10 because the calculator is programmed to be what we call log base 10. That's our number system, log base 10. Everything is based on 10s. Now, if there's no number and you just skip the box, if you want to fill in the 10, you can, but if there is no number there, it's assumed that it's a 10. Any questions? Okay, so this is only our first day with logs. All we did was a rewrite today. Okay, that's all you know is that exponent means the word log. Log is a fancy way to say the word exponent, and we can rewrite it. That's all we're going to practice next period. Okay? Alright, so if you didn't log into your computers, you can. And we're going to either work on the Kessel learning or the fluency for lesson 2 if you didn't finish it yesterday for some strange reason. I think I did all the questions. Mrs. Walters was here for the last 2.
Yeah.
And then you can go and work on the fluency for lesson 3. So between fluency, Kessel learning, that's on the agenda for this period. Bye, Gabby.
Gabby's liking it. Bless you.